Hello and welcome, and thanks for taking time to watch this solution demo. My name is Paul Buffington, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to take you through an overview of SRM onboarding and building out your service request catalog with Transport. Now, Transport offers many other features, and we actually talk about that on our website, but I'm going to focus specifically on this capability today. First, maybe you're not familiar with who Effectech is. We've been around since 2006 as a BMC Techno Alliance partner. Our consultants in the field face some of the early challenges of deploying Remedy ITSM, SRM, and some of the other solutions. And so they have actual field experience with some of the challenges of onboarding, managing, and loading data. And that has evolved into the product that you'll see today, what we call Transport. We take those best practices of our engineers that have learned, as well as working closely with our customers, and we put them directly back into the product because we want to be successful and as well as our customers' success in deploying Remedy ITSM. So let's get started with Remedy SRM. What I'll do in these slides, the next few slides, is provide an overview of the key capabilities, and then I'm actually going to show a live demo with a little bit more in-depth look at the technical capability. As an SRM developer, you're very familiar with the benefits that SRM offers to automating a request process. We can take a very complex process with all of its different steps and stages, decision points, data input that's required from the requester, and fully automate that in the complex capability that we call Remedy SRM. Now, with that capability and the benefit comes the challenge as a developer. That means for every offering that you have to build, there's a lot of work that goes into that. Now, I understand some of those offerings are simple, and in a matter of less than an hour, I can build out a simple offering. And that's fine, but then you have to look at migration and all that. And so there's a lot of work that goes into this, is what we talked about the benefit. And you think about the more complex offerings where maybe you have three versions of it. Let's say it's a desktop support and it has multiple fulfillment objects and you need three versions. Maybe you're going to localize it or just different audiences, different organizations. That means you have to duplicate that work multiple times. I'm going to show you a way that we're actually able to accomplish that much faster and more efficiently. That's done through Transport. Transport's developed by our engineers, as I said in the introduction, that have actually walked in the shoes of developers and understand the challenges of managing and deploying a data-driven solution. Transport installs as a Remedy-based application that has all of its own staging forms and workflow, allowing us to load data from our different sources and projects and load it into the staging form, validate that data, and then move it into the appropriate target application. That allows us to onboard all of the ITSM foundation data as well as the complexity of people support staff. And as we're focused on this section of the demo today, we'll be looking at deploying a full service request catalog, but not just deploying it, but also updating it as well. Transport also includes the capability of onboarding assets, CMDB data, including the complex relationships to support that data, as well as SLM. And once you've loaded that data into one environment, Transport makes it very easy and makes the data portable across all of the environments. I also will address that as well. We do everything in the context of a project in Transport. That means that I can manage multiple onboarding or loads of data at the same time. Transport has the ability to accelerate that project because I can take the data very quickly, load it, see where there's issues, resolve those issues, and then reload that data. Data validation is built into all of the staging forms within Transport. We cover all of the data validation that is required by the BMC Remedy applications. And then customers can add their own custom data validation. So in the case of SRM, it'll validate, does this SRD have the proper navigational categories? Do they exist? And if there is an issue, it'll tell you that you can resolve that. Bottom line, Transport streamlines the ITSM data management. Whether you're loading a service request offering for the first time or you're loading an update, it's very valuable to the data admin team. So let's consider SRM. You're very familiar with the objects that make up a service request offering, from the backend to ITSM fulfillment templates to the application object templates that register those templates, making them visible within SRM, to the process that you'll place them in, the PDT, and ultimately the service request definition that has all the questions, the mappings, and all the components that make up that service offering. If you think about that, just take your average moderate service request offering. How many clicks does it take to build out that offering? And then also, as you think about that, think about how many clicks does it take when someone comes back and wants you to make changes to that, and you've developed that now in development and it's on QA, and you have to get your changes on both environments. That can add up very quickly. What we do with transfer is we take a completely different approach. We build this via CSV files. That means my work order templates, in this case, my ITSM templates, I can get through and build very quickly. I can take existing ones that already exist and clone those. And I have 50% of what I need to start. And what you're seeing here on the screen is I've taken the CSV files that we use to develop, and I've turned them into an Excel spreadsheet that I color code. I highlight certain lines. It makes it easy as a developer. I can quickly move through and develop that. And then that same thing applies for your application object templates and even the complexity of a process definition templates. It just takes a few more lines that make up that object. But again, at the end of the day, I can quickly move through as a developer and create a new one or make modifications to an existing one. And then finally, with the service request definition, the same applies. It's a complex object, multiple lines, and once I become familiar as a SRM developer, I'm up and running in a matter of just a couple of hours building service request offerings in transport. So if we think about taking your requirements, placing them in the transport onboarding templates that I just showed you, and loading those, on average, as we've measured this with customers, what we've done is we go in and we say, what does it take you to build the service request offering today? And what does it take you with transport? And on average, we find between 40 and 45% savings in time. And that's because as I build out my catalog, I have other offerings I've already built. Let's say I have one, a project request. That's the example we'll be using today. I've already deployed it for one group, but I need 5 versions of that. They're just slight variations in the questions, the titles, localizations, those kinds of things. I can make a copy of those in the spreadsheets, make the changes, and load them. And so that savings actually tends to go up the more I use service request offerings that I've built with transport. The other part of that savings is ease of portability. The heavy lifting, the hard work goes into building this out in development. But every other environment you go to load this into, it's simply just load the files. All of the files, the ITSM templates, and any supporting data like opcats, prodcats, navigational categories that you add can move with those SRDs, so you have a complete release of data that you'll put into that environment. Let's compare some numbers. So if we were to have to think about a simple SRD, maybe a couple fulfillment objects, 25, 30 questions, not a lot of conditional questions. It might take me several hours. Now, 6 hours is, quite a bit, but it would take me a considerable amount of time to go through and build that. Whereas transport, it's going to be much faster. And what you'll find here is the more we move up, you're going to see the time savings goes in. And so it's pretty significant, these numbers, as we've gone through and measured these. And the other part of this, always taking account for, is how much time does it take you today to migrate that data? The import-export capability, even in 8.1, still has its challenges. With transport, I don't have to deal with import-export of the BMC solution. I'm building this with transport data load sheets. Transport's on the other server. I simply load that data. And I'll actually show you that in the demo here in a few minutes. Ease of portability. Once I've done the hard work of testing and the development, I can turn right around and load it into the other environments. So 2 benefits: ease of migration of all of that data, and my environments are now in sync. One developer I was with just recently, they found that the developers quite often made changes to the SRDs more in production, and the downstream environments never matched production. Now you can have the same service request offering across all of your environments. So that's that ease of migration and ease of bulk loading all of this data. Let's say I have a release of 10 SRDs with all of its supporting data. I can schedule a transport job, and then at 1 a.m. that night, it's going to go ahead and bulk load all of that data into that environment. And I'll show you that in the demo in a few minutes. So what I have today is a transport 8x environment. I believe it's 8.1. Transport's installed. We're going to go ahead and load about 15 SRDs to show you how quickly I can load a select number of SRDs. We're going to load a change to one of those because the questions aren't correct, so we're going to load an update. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you how I can bulk load additional data, additional SRDs as if they are not on this server, and I'm going to schedule them for a load, let's say into production. So those are the two scenarios along with a couple of the features that I'm going to highlight in this demo. So here's my transport or my ITSM 8.1 environment. Transport installs as its own remedy application with its own permissions. So that means that someone can be granted access to it, and they don't have to have full AR system administrator permissions. Now, one of the consoles I want to show you first is the projects console. Every aspect of data we load will always be done in the context of a project. Now, a customer, if you're multi-tenant, you would see your different customers here. If you're single tenant, you would just pick that customer record. Company is what it corresponds to. And you would have different projects that are currently active. The SRM project that we'll be working with is just getting started here. We'll go ahead and open it up and we'll take a look at it. Now, the only thing that is required is the configuration. We'll talk about that in just a second, but let me address the activities. If you wanted to, and you had multiple people working on different parts of a project, you could actually track the activities that are important to you with that project. So that way you can come back and see where they're at, how much has been done. It's a way of putting a little bit of project management into your overall onboarding and data management. It's completely up to you. It is an optional item in here. You can completely, can ignore it or you can leverage it. The other part that's really helpful is whenever I go and complete a data load. So I actually did one just before we started this demo today, and I went through and I loaded work orders. Now you'll see here that everything loaded successfully. 50 records loaded. There were no issues. App admin was the configuration name that was used to load the data. So you have an auditing capability that's going on all the time with data load. So if I inherited this project from someone else, I could go through and review this data and understand what was done successfully and where they had issues, and actually could run reports on this. So really valuable information. But bottom line with a project, what's most important is the configuration. Let's say I have a team of 5 people. We're all working, one's working on ITSM data, 2 of us are working on the service request catalog, another one working on some asset and SLM data. We all can have our own projects, our own directories. We can be loading at the same time, and we will not conflict with one another. Transport behind the scenes uses a multi-threaded filter API plugin to connect to the data from the CSV file, bring them in our staging forms. And so we're able to complete that, and this is where we're segmenting the data on the back end. This is how Transport knows where that data is at. Part of our enablement when we're training customers and deploying Transport is we go through the best practices on how to line up your projects and how to collect that data, how to store that data. So that's all a part of the enablement of Transport. But this is a really key important aspect. So let's go and close the project. Our project exists now. Let's go ahead and go over to the onboarding console. Now, I'm the data admin. I'm an SRM developer. I'm involved with loading this next release of the catalog. I've been building out these SRDs, so I'm now ready to go ahead and load this data. So one of the things I want to just show you is SRM phase 1. It knows what activities, what was done recently. So if you're using all of this here, you can review it. We break the data down by data type. You have ITSM data, people data, asset and seem to be SLM and SRM. I want to go to ITSM data because we know as I build a service request offering, I am dependent upon the foundation data that has currently been loaded in the environment. And this happens many times. You're adding a whole new set of SRDs. You may need to add some new data. So if I can very easily come in here, let's say I have some new operational categories that need to be added. I'll go ahead and clear out the previous ones. It knows where the file is at on my project, and I can choose to import and transport. So as I go through a deployment of a service request catalog and I find new data I need to add, obviously working with the appropriate person that owns that data, I would go ahead and get that file, that CSV file filled out and loaded. And you can see how quickly that data came in. And there were no errors in this case here, and I'll show you some errors in a few minutes. But I wanted to show you that ITSM Foundation is completely covered by Transport and its capability. As an SRM developer, what I really care about probably are opcats and prodcats, assignment rules, and then right here, task templates, task group templates, incident and change templates. So those are the ones that we'll be loading as a part of our project. I've already preloaded those. Let's go ahead and skip over to the SRM data. Now, one of the first ones of deploying this is we add these 15 SRDs, is we'll load work orders. Now I'm going to go ahead and load these right now, and I've intentionally inserted one of the records as an error. You will see once this loads that it does not stop the data load. In fact, right here, if we were to look at this, we get a summary. There was one that failed. 24 were successful. So you get this nice summary of the data, how long it took, how many were successful, how many failed. Really good summary. It actually writes this out to the log file along with any of the details of why that record failed. So I could go look at the log file. But what I want to do here is I just want to see, why did this fail? So I'll go ahead and drill into the record, and it's going to go ahead and say that this product category doesn't exist. So I can come over here and I can validate, okay, where does it have an issue? So it's not the PDA, it's not the wireless device. There it is right there. It does not have communication. It is communication endpoint. So I need to fix that issue and then come back and reload this data. So what I can do is go to my CSV file where I have my prodcats, add it to my data load, go load it, and fix the issue. So issues like this can be resolved very quickly. Now, let's move on to the rest of the SRM data. Now, I've preloaded already my navigational categories, my application object templates, and my process definition templates. And I'll talk a little bit about these files that we use to create these in just a second. But I want to just show you that these have been loaded. So I'm going to load my SRDs in just a second. But before I do that, I want to actually show you the catalog that we are starting out right now with. If I go to online and what is currently deployed, search 2 SRDs. That's it. Basically an empty catalog. And what we're going to load here in a second, in fact, let's go ahead and start that data load. So we'll go ahead and go here to SRD, import and transport. Now what it's going to do is it's going to take each set of records, certain number of rows within that CSV file, and it's going to go through and validate them. The last line in there is an action line that tells, it's actually a field inside of the SRD form that tells workflow within SRM to go ahead and take that SRD, approve, and then activate it. So it's the same thing if you were going through the buttons on the top screen. We're using those fields on the hidden fields behind the scenes. So that's really beneficial that you can actually go and load your SRDs and have them come in as offline or online, however you want to load them. Now this is where it's getting the data from. And what I typically do, so each one is based on a file. And what I've done is, as a developer, kind of a best practice, I've taken the files as I'm working on a new project. Let's say I have 30 SRDs to build, and I'm going to be working on these in the next couple of days. I will go ahead and put the files I want to work with, into an Excel spreadsheet. I just find it's very easy to work with. I have all of my templates here. So here's all of the incident templates, change templates, work order templates, which we just loaded. Work order templates, for the most part, most of the time, are single line. So as you see here, password reset, user desktop. Now, software install is actually associating some task templates and task group templates with it. So it's multiple line items for this type of a work order. As you can see right here, very easy to work with. Let's say I had to create a bunch of new ones here, and I'm going to create a bunch of new work orders. Paste. Now I'm ready to start making the variation of these different ones, whatever the new name is, and I can go down through. Let's say there's going to be 12, 11 different versions of this and different names, obviously. You can see how quickly and easily you can move through in creating templates, pasting data in, removing data. So simple to work with. And as an SRM developer, I much prefer to do this because I can do my job much faster and more efficiently. And we'll also look at how I can update things faster. Let's take a look at the other files. AOTs, application object templates, single line. As you can see here, the name, summary. If we come over here, fields I expose, just a single column. What I do as a developer as a best practice, I have a notepad where I have all the common fields I like for different types of templates, and I go ahead and I just copy out of there, paste in, and I've exposed the fields that I want to expose. And it's simply, what's the field, what's the default, and is it exposed by yes, hidden, or visible? And yes is visible. Separated by a semicolon, next field. So again, there's AOT. PDT, it's multiple lines. So project initiation request, here's the baseline that creates the PDT record, and then all of the other ones are child records. So your variables, so here's the variables that we create. Okay, so they're all process inputs. And then here's the process mapping that takes the field that we want that's exposed in the AOT and map it to the variable within the PDT. Again, very simple to work through. If it has something that has a little bit of flow to it, then we can actually get into this flow item that tells us how these different items would actually go through in their sequence. So here's a bunch of AOTs that are in sequence. Add new phone line, create new. And so it's just a matter of actually these three, and then these are the sub two child items to that. For an SRM developer, and sitting down in a matter of just a couple of hours. I was just with a customer last year in Montreal, SRM developer, very experienced and seasoned. They knew SRM. In a matter of probably 3 hours, they were up and creating SRDs within Transport and loved it because of how much time it's saving them in creating these objects. And the part that was the most just difficult for them is when they have to make changes, because they have to go back into the GUI, they have to click through all of this, and there's some of those items such as field mappings, question mappings, and questions that can take a lot of time. Final file I want to show you, SRD. Same thing we saw in the PDT. There's a baseline that makes up the majority of that object in the SRD form. So for example, here's the SRD, the instructions, the navigational category, process template. What's the start date? All of these ones that you see on that form. Now, all of these other items that are stored in subforms are other line types. So for example, a question. Oops, here's a question. What's its order? What's its instructions? What conditions it has? Is it required? Is it text? Is it date? All of this, again, if I was creating a new set of questions in another SRD, I could come in here and say, oh, these are really what I want, copy, go into that other one, paste it, and I'm making those changes. Same with variable mappings. Very fast and efficient in creating your object. So that's a much more in-depth in the demo here, but I wanted you to get a sense of how easy it is to work with these files. Now, let's go back and look at the results. So as we can see here, and we'll just go back and get a summary, everything loaded successfully, or I can scroll down through and see the results. Now, let's look at this over here. If we look at our catalog now, let's take a look at the project request. So here's what we see. We see two project requests. The one I want to focus on is the schedule engineering project. So this is the one I've created. I want to go ahead and request that now. And let's say I've loaded into UAT and my customer's now ready to test this. And what they're going to find, they gave me the initial requirements, but now that they see it on the screen, they're like, this question doesn't work. And site and region, this is not what I wanted. I want something a little bit different. These aren't all the questions, and I don't want all of this up here. I don't want to see all of this. I just want something real simple. So again, this isn't a good example where you've loaded the SRD on dev, you went through all of that work, you got migrated to UAT, the customer now has their hands on it, they're testing it, and it's not matching what the original requirements that they communicated. So this would take some time to go through and update, and you probably wouldn't even go into dev to update it. You go right to UAT and make the changes there. So here's how quick and easy it is to make a change to an existing SRD. Let's go through that. So we go over here, we create, I take the SRD out that I want. So the SRD I have, go ahead and open this up, and I'll go right to the actual CSV file. We won't use the other one. So we'll just close this one out. Okay, so here's the one we've loaded, okay? So let's find the one that we need to update. And we're gonna go ahead, it's the schedule engineering request. So this is the one that we're gonna go ahead and update right here. So what I would do typically is, okay, I know I need to update that one. I'll save this one off and I'll do a save as and I'll change it. And here's the questions right here. So here's all the questions they want to change. So I save this off as just that. I just keep just this one SRD in there. Let's say maybe there's a couple, but you get just a file that's going to be that update. Now what I've already done to save time is I've created that file. I want to walk you through what you're going to see. So what we have here are just the items that will be updated in this data load. And what we see here is I'm going to highlight the questions here and I'll walk you through what changed. Notice I put a version number in. That's the other thing that's really helpful. So I could leave the previous version in and load a new one to where I can keep the two for comparison. So that is possible. So now we see, okay, now we've got project name, engineering group. We have some conditional questions here. So here's our conditional questions. Okay, so it's based on project type. It's going to be development kickoff or product review. And so I went in very quickly, added these questions. I actually had them in another SRD, very similar. I copied, pasted them in here, and modified the questions to fit the requirements. But this type of change is much faster in the CSV. Open up the CSV, make the change, and then here's the other key element. It's this action right here. These two actions right here allow me to reload this file. I don't even have to delete the SRD. All I have to simply do is have these two lines added to the file, and there's an action line for a field that BMC includes, a status field called take SRD offline, delete SRD. Now it only has to be offline to update it. I like to delete it because I'm basically going to load a brand new version of it. And then the last one is activate it. So let's go load it and take a look at the results. So we come back over to transport. We go ahead and clear out our data. And all you have to do is take and place your file on the server. So that was called project 1 import and transport. And it's going to go ahead and connect with the filter plugin, get that file, bring the records into the staging form, validate them. And because import only brings them only into the staging form, import and transport causes the workflow to do the validation. And if the record passes the validation, it will go ahead and push it into the target form. And in this case, the target form is the SRD form. Let's go look at the result. So let's go back up here. Let's do our search again. And you are going to notice already one of the changes they wanted. They wanted a nice icon for it. Okay, great. Well, let's open it up and see the results. There we go. We've cleaned it up. And I didn't show you that. I actually went through. It's just another set of the columns further out to the right. Is this visible? And it's just like we're in the GUI. You say, is it visible or not? So we have just the fields we want. So project name is all right. You can see here I added conditional questions. Now, the one thing I also want to show you is field mapping. Now, before I do this, I want to show you how I got all of the fields into that one column. We'll open this back up for just a second. And that's why this field, or this row, keeps jumping up to be so large, is because of the mapping. This is a question, this is a variable mapping. So let's just expand this out, and we'll go over and take a look at it. And what we do in this case, and this is one area as an SRM developer, for those watching us have faced this, it is very time consuming to deal with mapping all of your question values into a certain field, like the notes field in this case, and then someone wants to change it. The only way to change that today is you have to clear it all out of there in the mapping that BMC does in the SRD form, the questions, and rebuild it from scratch. There's no way to do this. With transport, all I have to simply do, oh, you want another field? Okay, plus, add that, change it, the order, whatever. And I typically will do it in Notepad and then just paste it in here. So really, really beneficial in doing the mapping. So let's go look at the results. So if we open up this work order, we will see that all of the values were mapped into the notes field. And here are the results. So everything there that we had for questions and answers, it's kind of a best practice I typically will use when I'm building out fulfillment objects, or we'll put it into the work info is another one we potentially could. You could also, as we've done in this case, map some of the fields into fields on the details tab. So hopefully you're starting to see how transport, these little places along the way, add up to be a very large time savings as you move along and the more you use transport. Now, what about, okay, so I've loaded an SRD, I've loaded some changes to the updates, but what about migration? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, right now on this server, I have a total of 18 SRDs. Just picture in your mind for a second, this is not development, this is production. I built 3 complex new offerings that I now need to release at 1 a.m. into production, my change window. But I don't have to be there to do it, and I want to bulk load all of the data that's involved. How do I do that? Well, we have a feature called transport jobs that any data link you run, we call these data links, data sources of data links. I can basically link all of these together and bulk load a set of data. We do that with a feature called transport jobs. Transport jobs allow me to create a job or copy an existing one. And in this case, I want to do bulk migration of SRM data. I create a project for it. I can associate it with a project that's on that server on production where I would place my files, and what it will do on the run schedule that I actually have it for, it's going to go ahead and queue up at that time and load opcats, prodcats, navigational category. Now let's say I'm going to load, in fact, in this example, I did not include navigational categories in that folder. It'll just skip over, and as long as it is not needed by any downstream data file, the data load will not error out. Now, if there is, let's say I left something out, there was a mistake, it's going to go ahead and give me an error. So let's go ahead and run this. And I'll show you where the files actually reside while we're waiting for that to run. And I'll show you the SRDs when we're done. So what I've done on this server is just created a data migrations folder, SRM, and here are all of the files that we're going to go ahead and load. So this becomes almost a transient folder that is used as a temporary basis on a nightly, weekly basis. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and load, and you would probably have multiple of these folders here, and you would just use them for different data loads. You could even use this for an automated data feed if you wanted. Now, when this is done running here in just a second, it will actually come back with an error because I've left out one of the files, and I won't go through looking at the error. We'll just go look at the results. In fact, let's just go over there now. And if we refresh, we will now see that 2 of them are in. File restore, notebook, workstation. So that's the one I really wanted to show you. This one, in fact, I'm going to show you the PDT that was loaded. Let's go there real quick. So notebook workstation, take a look at this PDT that we created with transport. That's the other part of working within the process definition form with this Flash interface. I have run into challenges where some of my objects will disappear, or I'm having a hard time getting them in the right sequence. In this case here, this was all built with transport in the sequence, the conditional aspect of the PDT. And it also created this SRD. Whoops, wrong one. Work. There it is. I just want to show you this at the conditional question. So is this a new workstation? Yes. Is it no? So the end result for this one is we've initiated a service request offering that was built completely by transport, loaded in just a matter of a few minutes. And because I'm answering my questions, it ends up down here for work order readiness. So procurement wasn't required because I said it was not a new one. So this is an example of loading a very complex SRD, and I loaded 3 of them using transport jobs, and here is the result. Now, it did have an error because I was missing my operational navigational categories. That file was missing from the data load, but it didn't stop the data. In fact, let's just drill into it. What you'll see here is you can go through and review the results of each data load. If you were coming in the next day and you wanted to see, what was the problem, you could go through, and it's actually in the log file that reveals it, where I actually had two records failed within the data load. So really beneficial in the data migration. So to summarize, transport makes it very easy for me to build these objects and update them, as well as migrate them. Now that's transport. Same concepts apply to your SLM data, your assets seem to be, as well as all of your ITSM foundation data. To learn more about these other capabilities, I highly recommend visiting the EffectTech website and reading about them, as well as watching the other demo videos that are available. So to summarize, you think about all of these objects that you as a SRM developer know and work with, you see how quickly you can go through and actually create them as well as update them. Now, we'll note that your service levels entitlements have to be built outside of transport, and then you just reference them, because most of the time, service levels you don't, but entitlements because you can load these with transport. The entitlement, we don't use a lot of entitlement rules, so you can go ahead and build those and then reuse them. So you just reference them in the file. But all of the foundation data that you might add, assignment rules, templates, obcats, and prodcats, it quickly being able to load those updates and take and manage this as a complete release of data is very beneficial. So thanks for taking time to watch this demo of Effective Transport. If you have any questions, go ahead and visit the website. There's more information to be learned there. There's some additional recorded webinars. As well as, if you have any questions about this demo today, please send an email to the solutions team at effecttech.com. I actually monitor that email, and I will actually respond back to you with whatever questions you might have,